head of corporate sustainability at Faber Castell. And I think the question today I'm trying to discuss with you is how can we achieve or improve ESG, which I suppose is a new word for sustainability or a new abbreviation for sustainability in a rather global organization. I think Faber Castell has worked a lot at Faber in sustainability since many years, and even before I've joined the company. And I think it's an interesting aspect to discuss with you how this journey unfolded in the past. Let me just give you a quick overview of Faber Castell. I believe many of you know the company. It's a very well-known brand in many markets around the world. It's a German stationery company. It was founded 1761 and is considered the oldest known company in the stationery industry. But the discussion is with the competitors who are also headquartered around Nuremberg, Städler and Schwan, who is actually really the oldest. But I think the oldest documented proof was Faber Castell in 1761. We are today producing around 2.3 billion pencils a year, achieve around 450 million to, I think this year it'll be much better, 550 million revenue. Have around 7,000 employees worldwide, 1,000 in Germany. It's a family-owned company for over 9 generations. We produce in 9 countries around the world and have sales offices in 23. And I think we are present in around 120 countries. So it's a very global organization. And we do manufacture high-quality drawing and writing instruments, as well as cosmetic products. This is our global footprint, as you can see here. So these are our manufacturing facilities. They span from the North America, where we manufacture cosmetics products, to Colombia, Peru, Brazil, Germany, Austria, India, Indonesia, Malaysia, China. So this is our manufacturing footprint. And despite still being a quite small, medium-sized enterprise, in fact, so we are not considered a corporate, and I think that makes us quite unique in the way of how we approach things. So we are not a very centralized or centrally organized company, but a very decentralized company with a lot of global entrepreneurs, if you want so, since many years. This is the headquarters in Stein. It's a quite beautiful old production facility where we do still manufacture our art and graphic products. This is the different categories, as you know. So there's playing and learning for children. There's art and graphic. I think these are the 2 most important categories. We have premium and fine writing, general writing and marking, plus the cosmetics products. It's, as I said, now the 9th generation. It all started with Caspar Faber in around 1761. The last family member who managed the company was Count Anton. He passed away in 2016. And today the company is managed by an external board. For a long time, Faber Castell, as I said, so was considered relatively, or we can consider them very sustainable, and always had a very comprehensive approach towards sustainability. So I think it all started very early in the 19th century with the first corporate health insurance for the workers in Germany. And there was always a very comprehensive approach to that topic. I think later in the 1950s, we installed a water turbine that is still generating around 30% of our electricity in Germany. We, in the 1980s, we planted a forest project. I'll talk about that in a minute. It was, in the end of the 90s, fully certified by FSC. We, in the 2000s, signed up for the Social Charter, which ensures that all workers globally are enjoying the same rights and is in accordance to the ILO standards, very strict. It's something that we uphold since today. In 2014, we became a carbon neutral company, or at least a corporate carbon neutral company. I'll talk about this in a minute as well. Since 2017, all of our wooden products are FSC certified. Since 2019, we are ESG rated and generate more than 80% of our energy today by comes from renewable sources. We started with product carbon footprints, and we are now in the last 2 years working consistently on rolling out own energy generation, and have now this year started working with an internal carbon price to try to facilitate and expedite this transformation. So this again is our footprint. These are different products. I think again, just highlight and keep in mind that we do manufacture many different products in many different countries. So it's not always the same production that takes place. And all of those products are sold across the world by our entities. We do have this forest, which is, I think, our core, and it was for a long time our core sustainability project, if you want. So it covers two needs. It's our wood supply. Around 80 to 90% of our wood, our wooden pencils are made of wood from our plantation. It's located in Brazil, around 2,000 kilometers south of the Amazon. So it's in a savanna, as you can see from the aerial picture. So it was a reforestation project. It started in the 80s, around 10,000 hectares of wood, which are in the meantime fully FSC certified. Around a third of it is kept as a natural reserve. So there is a bit of a biodiversity project there as well. And it's fully owned and managed by us and by our company. It has this beautiful aspect of a fully integrated, backwards integrated value chain. So we plant our own trees and we harvest them, convert them into pencils eventually. So in Brazil, we own the entire pencil value chain. This is very unique. I don't think any other stationery or pencil manufacturer does that. At the same time, this forest is our source for carbon credits that we are using to offset our corporate carbon emissions. So this is a process, as I mentioned, started in the 90s, managed by TÜV, or not even managed by, but audited and certified each year by TÜV. We manage it by ourselves, and we convert it and can calculate it by ourselves. But each year we get a certificate by TÜV, and they're also managing our carbon account, if you want so. So this is since 2014 what we did. And in the past, when I took over that sustainability role 5 years ago, I think this was pretty much where Faber Castell stood. It was very much focusing on wood and renewable wood sourcing, or sustainable wood sourcing, as well as the carbon neutrality. And we, back then in 2015, 16, 17, started thinking, okay, what else? And it was before the ESG discussion reached current heights, was what else it would be relevant for us, and how do we approach that? What kind of strategy can we apply here, and what are the main drivers and value drivers for us? And we, together with the executive team, split it up and said, okay, there's an arm, a leg of raw material that needs to be sustainable, which one is of course wood, and I think we do see some changes here. There's potential raw material shortages coming up, but there are compliance and legality issues. There's public scrutiny. However, at the same time, we don't see any bigger problems. There is a well-established global product declaration available, FSC. We do have our own sources. So I think we're pretty solid on that one. We started thinking, and it's a project I can't really talk about a lot at the moment, but the only one thing that we want to do and achieve here is to localize the supply a bit more, because the supply chains are pretty global, which is not very healthy and doesn't really make sense. So that's one arm, but more or less we said, okay, this is fine. The other topic, which wasn't as hot as it is today, was plastics. And pretty open, I think more than half of our sourcing volume is plastic. Still, we do manufacture a lot of plastic products. We pack a lot of our products in plastic, in single-use plastic. Was a topic we didn't focus on at all. So again, there is a public scrutiny that came up. However, at the same time, the supplier markets are very fragmented. It's very difficult for us to source consistent volumes, for example, of recycled materials that allow us to manufacture the product qualities that we need. There is, however, legislation upcoming, and plastic packaging, for example, is something that we could start, because there's no need to pack things in plastic if we can pack them in cardboard. So I think there was a bit of, okay, can we avoid it and substitute it? And how do we tackle the other problem? And I think this is, and I'm coming back to this later, one of the topics where I feel it's the biggest challenge here, because it impacts the product design at some point. So if you want to move away from packaging, that's fine. I mean, if you want to swap the packaging material, that's fine. There are lots of solutions available, but moving away from an established source of virgin plastic into a recycled plastic feedstock is going to impact your product design, and then the whole organization needs to work towards this goal. And I think this is very different to, for example, the decarbonization topic, which is the third strategic arm that we identified, where it's more like a technical solution. Like, nobody really cares how electricity or energy is generated. The organization doesn't need to change their doings. The mechanics of the organization don't need to change. So this is something we can still, like, if we install solar panels or find other sources of electricity or swap the light bulbs to LEDs, I mean, nobody really cares. It's a CapEx and OpEx question, but not so much how a change management question. So this is a third leg, of course. So these are the three arms that we started working towards too. I'm going to skip this. This is an overview that you can find in our sustainability report. You can download it, the various achievements and how we look at it. So what we do then, I think eventually we concluded we needed some longer term targets to be rolled out and to give the organization certain objectives to work towards too. And they pretty much followed the page before. There's the carbon footprint. So our aim is to reduce the corporate carbon footprint based on the current scope. Coming to that in a second. We measure it, not so much, we don't measure the total carbon footprint. We do measure the total carbon footprint because it's what we offset, but the way we look at it is more like a specific consumption. It's like, how much carbon do we need for 1 million pieces of produced products? Because if we just want to get rid of the influence of the market, basically. So we want to become more efficient in our production. So that's the overarching goal, which then aligns and is aligned with the energy goal. So can we reduce energy consumption by 55% until 29-30? Again, it's a specific energy consumption we want to reduce. We don't, in an ideal world, this will then also reduce the total energy consumption by the same amount, but we just want to get rid of any influences, because if we just acquire another player or divest an entity, out of a sudden we would have reached our target. So that wouldn't be what we want to achieve. So we want to become better in what we are doing. Same goes for energy. Well, energy self-sufficiency is the third leg on energy, where we say, okay, can we generate more own energy? Which basically means installing solar panels or finding other sources. Plastic, I think two main objectives here. One is to avoid plastic packaging. Reduce the share of conventional virgin plastic for single-use packaging to below 5%. Today it's, I think, almost 50-60%. So this is this is already one of those targets where you have to involve the whole organization, and it's nothing like the tech team can just do by themselves, because you immediately start talking to marketing and product development and sales, and everybody has an opinion on how products have to be packed. And the same goes for plastic product as well. But there is also the question, where are the sources? Where can we tap into? And this is not very straightforward, and it's internet globally very, very different. So there are markets where you get more, like Central Europe it's quite okay, I'd say, but other markets like Asia and Latin America aren't that developed yet. So this is something we just need to keep in mind. Last but not least, we have gender equality, of course. So our aim is to achieve 50% share of women in leadership positions. This is the last social target at the moment. This was the starting point, and we are still thinking to add further targets as we go. But I think the one thing that I learned, and I think we need to just be aware of it, the technical targets are something pretty global, and we can apply them more or less everywhere. I think that's it's easy. But the product design, for example, is already something where we also see the different, a very different approach to sustainability in the various markets. So sustainability, and I think this was discussed yesterday as well, is not always, it doesn't have the same importance everywhere, and people understand different things under it. And there's one, like there was recently an internal discussion about further social targets, and there was a suggestion from, I think, our Australian colleagues to introduce an LGBTQ target. Then we got a message from our Malaysian MD, said, okay, guys, you can do that, but not in Malaysia because it is forbidden in Malaysia. So I cannot talk about this in Malaysia. So this already shows you that this topic is not, you cannot just do it globally. You just have to be very nuanced here. And the way that Faber Castell works, I think this is something that will take a while, and then we'll find an approach that suits all of us. This is how it looks. Our key KPIs that we are measuring and publishing in our sustainability report. There's a bit of an upswing in terms of energy consumption per million pieces in 2021. That's an effect of the pandemic. There was lots of machines running. But the output dropped in various facilities. Nevertheless, our carbon emissions have dropped continuously. I'm talking about the carbon footprint. We're looking at that in a moment more. Waste, there were some refurbishment works and construction works that were counted as waste. That's why it went up. Wastewater, something we measure as well, and have managed to reduce steadily since 17-18. So this is the way we look at it, and it's going to be measured and published in our sustainability report. You can download it on our webpage. So what do we do, and how does that work in a company like Faber Castell? It's a timeline of the most important milestones. I mentioned the water turbine already in the mid-50s. Now that's the lead factory in Stein. That's where we manufacture our color and graphite leads. In the mid-80s and 1980s, we established the forest. In 1999, it was certified. 2001, we started certifying the biodiversity. There's not certifying, but counting for the biodiversity that is developing in our forests and in these natural reserves. The carbon footprint was first certified by TÜV Rheinland in 2014. And since 2018, we are actively working on decarbonizing our production across the world. And 2020, I'd say, was the time when we started looking very closely into plastics and how to avoid it. That's the biodiversity inventory, if you want. So since 2001, there's a university in I think Sao Paulo, Brazil, that they are every 5 years just going into those reserves and overseeing the development, and there's a very impressive increase of the biodiversity that took place in those reserves. So the number of animals and plant species that were identified in 2001 was 187, and this number went up to 716 in 2020. So that's quite a nice side effect, if you want. So I think it's nothing we do actively with. We just leave it there and just maintain those areas. But as you can see, you can combine economic and ecologic benefits in this project. Carbon footprint, it's basically scope 1 and 2 and some scope 3 emissions, mostly transport related. Our biggest source is electricity, and then comes transport of goods, a bit of heat, and business travel is very little. But we have to say that we are excluding third-party merchandise, which makes up quite a bit. So if we would include that, our carbon footprint would probably be significantly higher. But we haven't yet found a way to account for all those small suppliers we have in China and India, and somewhere where we get a number of erasers or sharpeners and little bits and bobs. So this is something we have in our mind, not sure yet how we can tackle that. Nevertheless, we have managed to reduce our carbon footprint from, in absolute terms now, from 16, 17, was it around 60,000 tons? Very little. I mean, you don't need a lot of resources to manufacture pencils. It's a small product, but nevertheless, and have almost reduced it almost by 60% until 2021. Some of it was a bit of a volume decline that we have seen. I have to know that 16, 17 was a market. Was a very good year. We were all benefiting from those adult drawing books that were very popular there. So it was the peak of the peak. But nevertheless, 60% is good. And if you look at the right side, it's exactly what I've mentioned. It's not so, I don't really care so much about the absolute carbon footprint. I think this is something that always depends on the market and external factors that we can't really influence. But the specific carbon emissions per million pieces produced, and we've managed to reduce this by 30%. We did this mostly by switching electricity sources from conventional electricity to renewable energy. This was possible in some of our markets, like it was possible in Germany, it's possible in Austria, it's possible in Brazil and Peru. In other markets, it's not possible. It's in Asia, it's not possible to switch, at least for us, it wasn't possible to switch our electricity supply. There we just rely on the grid, which unfortunately has quite negative carbon emissions. I mean, they rely heavily on coal for electricity production. So this is something we looked into, and started installing solar panels in those markets. That was the first of our rollouts. So we started in Malaysia and then in India in 2020 and 2021 to cover the roofs with solar panels. And this is going to be rolled out now this year in Colombia and Indonesia. Brazil and China are the next in line, which would effectively reduce our carbon footprint even more. And that's something that we have introduced this year. It's an internal carbon price. There was a discussion because before that we compensated for the emissions. We just compensated the emissions for free, basically. So we got the certificates from our forest, and we used them to offset the corporate emissions. And I discussed that at length with our board and CFO and said this is not right, because we're depleting a value of the future. At some point, carbon will be a future, and I think we need to incentivize the organization somehow to invest into carbon saving measures. And we decided to try, and I mean, it's really trial and error, so we just rolled it out. It's an arbitrary price curve that we came up with, which is increasing and which shall be used for investments, because at the moment we often face the problem that the investments didn't really stack up. Just the solar panels, for example, in Brazil would be a perfect country for solar panels, but the electricity is so cheap in Brazil that the ROI and all sorts of other hurdle rates wouldn't be passed. So we're trying to work this out now with this internal shadow price that just should be used as a artificial benefit that you can use for your ROI calculation and for assessing the economic feasibility, because we are pretty convinced that the value of the carbon stored in the forest is going to increase dramatically in the next years. Carbon neutrality, as I said, it's looked at twofold. On the left side, it's the corporate carbon neutrality, which is our main focus. And on the right side of this graphic, you see that we also start looking at it a bit more broader and include some products. How can we offer carbon neutral products? So we offset the product emissions for a number of products, really, but it's not broadly in use. So there's just a few products, as you can see here from Eberhard Faber. It's a brand that belongs to our portfolio. They have offset a few products, and then some markers that we're manufacturing in Austria, they also offered as carbon neutral product, because it was very difficult for us to communicate the difference between the corporate carbon neutrality of our company versus, is this a carbon neutral product? So there are more and more requests and inquiries from our consumers and customers, like, is this a carbon neutral product? And no, it's not, because it's not including packaging, it's not including the raw materials, it's just manufactured carbon neutrally. So in order to work our way through this, we started offering carbon neutral products. But I have to say we haven't really concluded if we should continue doing that. I think it's being continued or roll it out further or not. For this kind of projects, we use voluntary credits. So we don't use our own carbon stock for those products. We want them to be priced into the product. That's why we don't use the free credits available. Avoid single-use plastic is, for me, as a more technical guy, always was the biggest no-brainer, actually. And I was very, very surprised to see how long it took our organization to embrace this and start doing it, really. And this is an example from Peru, where they really did it quite quickly and decided very broadly to just stop using those plastic zipper bags and other single-use plastic materials and move to cardboard. Other group companies found it much harder to do so for whatever reason. In particular, I have to say the German organization was particularly slow, and it was particularly difficult to discuss with them. And that's exactly what I've mentioned before, that once you start touching the product, which is in fact where our sustainability starts and or ends, however you want to look at it, you have to lead very comprehensive discussions with many stakeholders, and it's much more difficult than swapping electricity supply, installing solar panels, because you get all sorts of people involved. It has become a corporate target, and we are now working towards that target. Peru was the first, and I think that is one of those learnings in this global organization when we identified, okay, what can we do? Just try to find somebody who does it with you first. Just create a little lighthouse, just do it. And that helped tremendously, that this one entity did it and the other saw, okay, it works, people are still buying it. They even works in Peru, where people thought, okay, it's not the most sustainable country, doesn't play such a big role, but it really helped to make a case for the cause. Same here, it's also Peru, they really broadly swapped that. This is Colombia as well. In the past, they are our ruler manufacturing site in Bogota. So they last year decided to stop putting the rulers in those plastic bags and put them into cardboard. Product plastic, I've mentioned it already. It's a real challenge for us to do it. We did it with our markers. So they are largely made of recycled plastic and packed in cardboard in the meantime. So that was a longer project. But we do struggle with recycled plastic feedstock as a sustainable resource. So it's sustainable in the sense sustainable supply. So it's really, really difficult for us to ensure this, because it's not yet an established market. And I think from all of the targets, that's the one where I feel I'm not sure if we're going to reach it, because at the moment it's very, very tricky, and it has a lot of implications. Because in this case, if you start changing it into a resource that is not as consistent as the old one, you get all sorts of inconsistencies in your process and also for the product. So that maintaining the same quality or the same color is becoming increasingly difficult and stuff like that. And this really impacts product design. And I think at some point our organization will need to start thinking about a different product design and start thinking of marketing the products differently, because eventually you'll have to live with, if you really want to do that, you have to live with compromises in the way things look. They might perform the same way, but they just look differently. I mean, I think you all have seen products made of recycled plastic. Often they're a bit grayish, or they're looks like a bit of dirt. So I think this needs to be factored in it. This needs to be sold and communicated properly to the customer. So this is a very comprehensive exercise. A company like Faber Castell takes a long time to deal with this, given that you have such a long tradition of products. Well, last not least, since 3 years now, we are ESG rated. So one of our corporate financing structures require us to run through an ESG rating each year. We did this and have managed to grow this score from around 60 to 66 points. And I have to say it's a very good exercise for many aspects. First of all, it helped us to create a baseline, a broader and more comprehensive baseline than the one that we would see by ourselves. And it's objective, and it makes progress visible in the organization and for ourselves. So I'm pretty a big fan of us, and it gives us direction. So some of the, I haven't discussed it, but many of our little initiatives and actions that we have started came from like basically gaps that came up in this rating. So I think this is it's actually a very, very good thing for a company to do. It's not very costly, and it just gives you this one point in the year where you just discuss with the auditor, what have you done, what kind of progress have you made, what kind of systems, what kind of frameworks and structures have you implemented in order for your sustainability or ESG in this case performance to improve, as a very, very good thing. So now that's most of what I had to show today. So just give me a short page on like a lot of summary and outlook. So how do we achieve and improve it now in a global organization? I think, first of all, map and highlight materialities. What matters most for you, for the consumer, whatever. Just start prioritizing your activities and then begin somewhere and gain traction. I think that was what we did in this, that we're not a very strong corporate. We don't have a lot of corporate control, but just go somewhere. Like in the case of Peru, just find somebody who does it for you and with you, and create that lighthouse. Begin with the low-hanging fruits. Energy, emissions, I think is something, in my opinion, where we all, like most organizations, can find savings and there is potential. And then begin thinking about the higher hanging fruits, in this case, product design, something we are doing it right now. I think I wasn't expecting how long it took. Start measuring, of course, even if it's not perfect. Come up with KPIs and reports and just start tracking the progress. As I said, create a baseline, because progress matters, and it matters in the organization as well if you can show it. And ideally, I think this rating was really, really helpful, because it wasn't it wasn't the progress I'm tracking, but it's like a third party who tracks the progress. Very helpful. Understand the differences. ESG is understood very, very differently and valued very differently in the various markets. Find allies, implement a pilot, talk about it, and provide resources. I think eventually that's what we will need to do as well. We just need to find more resources who are dedicated to this cause. I think without dedicated resources in the markets and in the various departments, it's going to be very, very difficult to advance this topic. And that's all I have slides for today. So thank you very much. I'm not sure if there are questions or comments.